Okay, so this is video number 4. We just kind of previously discussed in the video how to draw a simple square. And we kind of did two different versions of it. One is writing out every single instance of that code, and then we actually found a way to simplify it. So this works out pretty well. But let's say you want to draw a polygon, or like maybe a hexagon, or maybe your friend wants you to draw a triangle or a octagon or whatever shape. Okay. So we could do is we could kind of just figure it out, do the calculations. So we write down, all right, if you're doing a hexagon, that's going to be 6 sides. And then we actually have to figure out what is the angle for our shape. Yeah. Now, in geometry, you may have talked about when you first talked about shapes, you have what are called polygons. Polygons are just figures with a multiple number of sides. Depending on the number of sides will dictate what kind of shape it is. So hexagon is 6, octagon is 8, duodecagon is 12, and so on. Now, one thing that we did learn about geometry is that the angles of all our shapes, so if I were to measure out, and let me see if I can get a good angle of my square. I can't really zoom in on that. If we measure out all the angles of our square, so 1, 2, 3, 4, the sum of all the angles in any shape is equal to 360 degrees. So the square has 90 degrees, 4 of them. So 90 plus 90 is 180, plus 180 from the opposite sides, that's 360 degrees. Okay. So every single shape all adds up 360 degrees. To find the angle, and it doesn't really matter what size your polygon is. It could be super, super large, like miles long. It could be very tiny to like a micrometer, whatever. The angles will always be the same, regardless of the size of your shape. The only thing that dictates the angle is basically the number of sides. So we can actually use a simple equation to figure out what that angle is. And that's going to be 360 degrees divided by the number of sides of your shape. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to write out a code that pretty much does that for us. So to do that, we're going to go into our logic category and we're going to create a new variable. So we're going to go into our, I guess our orange blocks, or let's see what color these will be. Tools, classic. So it's like a dark orange color. Okay, so logic variables. And so we're going to go ahead and make a variable. So just like in Tinkercad, it's going to ask us what do you want to call it. So I'm going to call it, I'll call it sides. You can call it whatever name you want. If we're dealing with one variable, we don't need to go create, it doesn't really matter what variable you use. But as you start getting more and more complex with your coding, you're going to be using multiple variables. It may be a good idea to name it something that makes sense, as well as something that's not too complicated. So I'm just going to call this size for now. Yep. So now what I'm going to do is I have a new block that says set my variable to 1. I'm going to drag and drop that right before my repeat command. Open up the drop down and then change it to my new variable called sides. So this is going to represent whatever polygon I want to do. So if I know the polygon, know the number of sides, I'm going to go ahead and put that in there. Okay, so in this case, I'll say, let's do 5 for now. Okay. So when we do the repeat command, as I mentioned before in the previous video, this number represents the number of sides. So I could type it out, but I'm going to be lazy. I just want to be able to write a code out that only need to change one number, and then the program will change everything else for me. And so to do that, I'm going to grab this variable, sides, and throw that right in there. So whatever number this is, it's going to repeat it that's number of times. And again, I only need to change that to control these two things. Okay. So then we're going to tell it to drive forward for whatever distance, and then we'll tell it to rotate whatever angle that is. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, it's a simple formula, 360 degrees divided by the number of sides. So because of that, we had to add in a math block. So that's going to be those green blocks like we did with Tinkercad. And we're not comparing anything. We're actually using a math operation. So that's going to be that first one. It says 0 plus 0. I'm going to throw that right in there. Okay. So the first number, again, that's the sum of all our interior angles, 360 degrees. And then we're going to go ahead, open this drop-down box, and then tell it we're going to divide. And we're going to divide it by the number of sides in our shape. So I'm going to grab sides again, and then throw that in there. Okay. So theoretically, what it should do is whatever this number is, 5, 10, 20, 3, 7, whatever number, it's going to update this number right here and this number right here, and it should pretty much reproduce a shape with that number of sides. So here we have 5, so that's going to create a pentagon. So let's go ahead and run the code and see what happens. And there we go. So you can see here we have the pentagon, starts, goes forward, forward, turn, does that 5 times, and we end up right back where we started. Now, let me go ahead and change the color, and then let's do an octagon, 8 sides. Okay, so again, all I did was change the color of the pen just for demonstrative purposes, and I just changed the number. And we'll see what happens with the robot. So run the code. Unfortunately, there is no fast forward, so pretty much the robot will be running at actual speed. And so there we go. And actually, the red color was unintentional, but with that, I've created a stop sign. And so as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 sides. What you'll also notice is that depending on the number of sides, the shape will start getting larger and larger. So the more sides, the bigger your shape is. So we could, if we wanted to, probably do some kind of equation with the distance going forward if we want to kind of keep it a similar size. But again, that's not too important. We're going to leave it as is. So let's go ahead and do a hexagon, and I'll change it to the color blue for this demonstration. Okay. So that's pretty much how we can actually start introducing variables and mathematical equations to create complex behaviors for a robot. So instead of telling it to move forward and turn a certain number of times, now we can do is we can change a simple number and that'll actually make the robot do whatever shape that we want. So for exercise 1, what I want you to do is I want you to figure out how to modify this code so that we make it so that it draws a shape on one side and then creates a mirror image of it on the other. So to demonstrate that, I've created a code, I hid it behind my screen. And so with this one, I am going to make it do, what is it? So in this case, 6 sides, so 2 hexagons, one on the right and then one on the left. So there's the completing the right side. Now it's going to go ahead and do the left side. Okay. So what your goal, your assignment, task for this assignment is to figure out how to make the code so that it does that. So again, the idea is that all I need to do is to change one variable. So let's say let's do 3 sides. Just by changing that one number, the robot will actually draw a different shape. So in this case, 3 sides, it should be a triangle. So that's the right triangle. And then here's the left triangle. Okay. So figure out how to make the code so that your robot does that. Once you are done, you're going to go ahead and share your project with your name. Call this exercise 1 and then download the code and then you can submit that into Google Classroom.